less sweetener than I normally do in my coffee, and I actually had to refill it because it was just too sweet to drink. And I have a sweet tooth, I love sweets, and so that is really weird for me to say. Hey friends, I am overdue for a check-in. It has been a little bit since my 30-day carnivore challenge has ended, which I did on purpose because I wanted to kind of see how things had changed during that time and what I noticed as I started adding different foods back in. Here we are. I finished 30 days. I didn't cheat. I enjoyed the experience. It was unique. It was hard on some days. It was really a lifesaver, I feel like, on some days. It was a good experience, and I am glad that I did it. Something people have asked me a lot are the best meals. What are the things that I really enjoyed eating? And I would have to say steak is probably the top, but Erin has been doing pork chops and chicken in the sous vide machine and then finishing them either on the grill or a pan, and that has been delicious. I feel like some of those drier pieces of meat, the sous vide machine is really the way to go if you want them to be juicy and tender and good. My overall numbers, if you will, I dropped 7 pounds in 30 days. Again, cutting out all carbs, all sugars. All I ate was meat and coffee. I kept coffee because I like coffee. I lost 2 inches on my waist. I lost 1.5 inches on my hips, and the other numbers didn't change significantly, but I thought it was funny because I usually get up in the morning and run a few days a week or walk. I have these pants that I wore in high school, actually, when I played hockey. I was wearing them to go running as it started getting colder, and they kept falling off, and I was like, this is a beautiful thing. My pants from high school, I'm like having to hike up constantly. That made me actually kind of delighted. Coming out of carnivore, I've been trying to think about what do I want this to look like, and while I was still doing it, I was like, I'm gonna go back to everything that I normally eat, save a couple things. I had said in one of the other videos, I really didn't want to go back to artificial flavorings in my coffee because they tasted very chemically to me. So I'm still using a sweetener, but I'm not adding all the flavorings and stuff that I used to add. And the sweetener, I'm adding in a much smaller amount. That I think has been really positive. Honestly, I think I could do coffee without sweetener now. Some days I do, and I actually still am adding just a little bit of salt, and it almost gives it like a salted caramel kind of taste, which I think before it wouldn't have been sweet enough for me to think that that's what it was. So my sensitivity to sweetness has really changed. The day after my 30 days, so day 31, I put less sweetener than I normally do in my coffee, and I actually had to refill it because it was just too sweet to drink. And I have a sweet tooth, I love sweets, and so that is really weird for me to say, but it definitely changed how I was tasting that. I tend to eat, when I'm doing keto or just the low carb, low sugar, I guess I probably wouldn't even call it keto, but when I do a low carb, low sugar diet with whatever vegetables and stuff, I tend to eat leftovers from dinner for breakfast. And so I had made this sausage soup the night before, sausage and cauliflower and a tomato broth. When I ate that the next day, I was like, this tastes so sweet. It was weird. It was so weird. And actually the recipe calls for sugar and I didn't put it in. And I was just thinking, I cannot even imagine how sweet it would taste had I put that sugar in. So I was really glad I didn't. Just noticing those kinds of things has been interesting. One of the things that I was really looking forward to is hummus from this local restaurant. It's homemade, it is delicious. And I got it and I was surprised at how strong the flavors were and how I could taste the garlic and I could taste lemon, and things that maybe just kind of got muddled together before were really standing out to me, and I could really taste them. And it was nice to be able to have kind of a new appreciation for those foods and flavors, and really kind of going back to, okay, what do I want to reintroduce? What do I want to add back in? What needs to stay out? And just kind of looking through those different things and trying to make those decisions. So that has been really interesting, really weird. Not really something I expected. I didn't expect things that I typically loved and liked and enjoyed and was used to now taste strange to me, which I guess if I had thought through it, it probably makes sense, but I wasn't expecting it. I also noticed that, again, not going back to sugars. But I have a tooth that there is nothing wrong with. I've been to the dentist multiple times. There's nothing wrong with it. But as soon as I started eating anything that had some of that sweetness again, I noticed that my tooth started hurting kind of off and on a little bit, which was interesting again because I hadn't had any tooth pain the entire time I did carnivore, and it was something that I didn't even realize was gone until it came back. And I was like, oh, that was kind of a nice benefit, not having to even think about that at all. Yeah, it was just a really interesting experience. I found that the times that were the hardest were when we weren't home for lunch. So if I was at co-op with the kids, they're homeschooled, so we meet up with a homeschool group. That was a little bit harder, coming up with something that I could easily take with me and eat. I actually did a lot of bacon because I don't mind it cold, and hard-boiled eggs for that. That was probably the challenging part. I don't think I went out to eat with anybody during that time. My mom was actually doing carnivore with us, so if I was over at her house, she would just cook whatever she was eating and I could eat that because we were doing it together. It really wasn't a challenge as far as social situations, but I think had it gone on further, it might have been. But again, Erin has done a really good job of, if you plan in advance and kind of know what you could get at a restaurant, or are just willing to say, look, I just want the steak, you can keep the sides, or I just want, you know, whatever the meat is, but I don't want sauce on it, or whatever it may be. It really isn't that hard to come up with something you could eat. So I have been thinking about, what do I want to eat from here? And it's funny because I was actually at a conference 2 days after I finished, and we were given these box lunches from a restaurant that a lot of people really like. And I was just surprised how lacking in flavor it was. And it just got me thinking, like, if I'm going to eat things, especially things that are like off plan, I want them to be delicious. You know, and so my everyday life is not going to be made up of foods that just make me swoon. If I'm going to go off plan to eat something, or if I'm going to allow myself a treat, if you will, I want it to be worth it. I want it to be delicious and not something that is going to become like an everyday thing. I want it to be worth it. You know, I want it to feel worth it. And I was just laughing because before this, I would have been like, oh, I got to eat a tortilla wrap, but now it's like, yeah, that's carbs I didn't really need for something that didn't even really taste good. Even my thought process on those kind of things have changed, really kind of evolved after doing this. And so I'm trying to be careful with the things that I'm allowing myself to eat. I'm trying to really make sure I'm not kind of going back to my lack of self-control ways. Everything is fine, just a little bit here, a little bit there, because it adds up really quick for me. I also had a really interesting conversation with a friend, and she had said they were doing kind of a low carb, low sugar diet. She said, you know, I thought to myself, what if anytime I wanted one of those kind of off-plan foods, I had to make it from scratch? And I thought that was really interesting. Now, some things are not hard to make from scratch, and I really like to bake, so I don't know that that would be enough of a deterrent for me. Things like hummus are a little more complicated, a little more intense, a little bit like you have to think it out a little bit more. It might be interesting to see how worth it is it to me to have these foods if I can't just go to the store and get it, but I have to put the energy in and the time in and the thought in to make it from scratch. We will see. I don't know where I'm gonna land on that one. I was out to eat with friends, again, after my 30 days was over. I carry more weight in my waist than most other parts of my body, and I've always been very sensitive to shirts like that are clinging to me, or clothing that fits just a little bit tighter, or when I sit down it kind of is tight in ways that I don't like. And I got home and I told Erin, I was like, I realized I never reached down and adjusted my shirt a single time. I never was like, oh, I'm gonna wrap up and hide, a single time. And I cannot think of another time where it was just that casual and that relaxed when I was trying to like dress up and look decent, you know, like I was wearing a little bit tighter clothes and going out. I don't know, it just struck me as really interesting that I felt like I had more confidence. That was fun as kind of the weight loss aspect of it. The food tasting different as kind of a elimination and reset for me was great. The whole experience was good. It was a good experience. I'm not going to stay carnivore. I think that's pretty clear. But I do think that it was a really good reset, like almost a hard reset for me when I've let things kind of just slip back in and get out of control a little bit. So as a self-control diet, it was really good for me. As an elimination diet, I think it was good for me, although I did not have any of the like this changed overnight kind of things, but I also didn't really have a ton of health issues going in, and I had already been eating pretty low carb, low sugar up until that point anyway. So it was not a big change in that regard, where I wasn't just going from high carb, high sugar to all of a sudden none. Thank you again for following along on this journey. I am glad I did it. I guess I'll just keep saying that. I'm glad I did it. It was worthwhile for me, and I'm thankful to have done it. I'm curious to see those of you that were doing it at the same time or around the same time. How did your 30 days go? What were your takeaways? And if you added food back in, did you notice that it tasted weird? I would love to know what food stuck out to you as like, this does not taste how I remember it. For me, it was hummus and all levels of sweetness, apparently. That was really unique and interesting. I also want to say thank you guys. I know Erin has been posting some videos lately, and we have been getting tons of comments and tons of really well thought out responses. I just want you guys to know, I really appreciate the people that are taking the time to say, hey, I feel like I'm invested in your story and I have this that I want to share with you, I want to tell you. To me, it feels like you're taking the time to love on us a little bit, and I really appreciate that. Of course, there are always comments that are a little bit not so nice, but that is what it is. But I just, for those of you that are just really kind of cheerleading and encouraging us in whatever health choice or whatever food choice or whatever, I just really appreciate that. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for sticking around. Check out the rest of Aaron's videos. He's been carnivore now for, it'll be
8 months,
I believe, on Thanksgiving. So he has a really unique perspective on some of that. Who knows? Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you'll have something to teach us. So we very much appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here, and I will talk to you soon.